So Zimbabwe's central bank has rolled out a new set of currency by the name ZiG, which is backed by gold and other metals. Today's flotation of a new local unit is the latest in the rounds of currency management exercise by one of Africa's most troubled economy. News reports say banks in Zimbabwe are struggling to understand how the new ZiG currency really works. Now let's get some insight into Zimbabwe's latest currency experiment and a bit of the wider picture as we bring on Joseph Ochieno, an international journalist and political economist based in Kampala, Uganda. It's great to see you again on the show tonight. It's the first time in the new year, so I could just... Thank you very much. We appreciate it. First time in the new year. I'm sure you can hear me.
Yes, happy new year to you, Bosom.
Yes, thank you so much for staying up late.
I can hear you, yes.
Thank you so much. It's about 9:30 p.m. in Kampala, so we apologize for holding you late tonight. You should be in bed, by the way. So, but what do you make of the new Zimbabwean currency, the ZiG, ditching the Zim dollar? You've covered Zimbabwe as well as the rest of Africa for many years of your career, so as a journalist. So, with this new currency, what do you make of it?
Yes, Bosom. I'm not sure the line is cracking. Can I continue?
Yes, please.
No, Bosom. This is possibly third or fourth time lucky for. I really hope it succeeds. Really, Zimbabwean economy has been struggling for a long time. But in the last 3 to 4 years, there was a huge amount of hope that this might change, and indeed it was actually changing in 2021 or 2021. In fact, the economy rose and grew by about 8.5%, the highest on the continent. In fact, right now, by and large, in relative terms, the Zimbabwean economy does far better than most other Southern African economies, except it is starting from a very, very low base. When it comes to the question of currency exchanges, it's basically directly linked to this hyperinflation. The hyperinflation thing really was basically once Zimbabwe got hugely crude and perhaps illegal sanctions. The economy struggle basically means that Zimbabweans were scrambling for goods and services for which there was, insufficient supply of. Hence, if you like, demand pull inflation. Because of lack of confidence in the economy, lack of confidence in the country, lack of confidence in their currency by their own citizens, the inflation could not really be controlled in sense the experiments with the different kind of currencies. At the moment, I think what really is required in Zimbabwe is a situation in which perhaps with this very particular third, fourth attempt on the currency, to look at the underlying causes. The underlying causes really, we should not forget, Zimbabwe had huge amount of drought in the last year or so, which actually caused a deflation in agricultural production by up to 14%. That basically means that in the last year or so, the economy is expected to shrink this year by 3% or thereabout. Basically, that's the problem. How far they go with this, as I said, goes back to really the underlying issue. Question of inflation in basically what I was talking about is really the politics of Zimbabwe more than anything else.
Okay, so what really is the way out of Zimbabwe's economic and financial quagmire that have dented the currency? Right now, the country has about 5 currencies circulating. The authorities in Harare says that we're not going back. We're not going back to the US dollar as the fiat currency. We've got to have our own sovereign currency. And I tend to agree with Zimbabwe that they need it, not necessarily needing the US dollar as a fiat currency. So they're stubbornly sticking with their own currency. But here we are, that right now, no one's really sure what currency is really the currency in place. Sovereign speaking, yes, is the ZiG as of today. But now, in terms of trade and other things within Zimbabwe, how does it really work, what you call this new experiment with currency change?
I think in a way you've given them advice and you've given them solutions. Zimbabweans basically just need to have confidence in their new currency, the ZiG. Up to, I think, over the weekend, the Zimbabweans were up to 80% or thereabout actually trading using alternative currencies except Zimbabwean currency. They basically just need the ordinary citizens, the traders in Zimbabwe basically need to use the Zimbabwean currency. They just basically need to believe in themselves. But of course, Zimbabwean economy was, this may be sound a bit controversial, was actually sabotaged within the region and globally. And we know that away from sanctions. But that's a different subject for my books coming up in future. What they need to do really is to continue to push for these illegal sanctions to let off Zimbabwe. They need to continue to attract sufficient foreign direct investments in Zimbabwe, which I think, as you know, is economics, but it's also about profit, but absolutely very, very political. Zimbabweans need to make sure that they maintain the politics of land reform. There is actually no excuse for them to go back. All they need to do is to address some of the underlying issues, which are really about corruption. I know elections are coming, and so therefore part of the temptation by governments in these situations is perhaps to continue pushing more money in big government. They need really to squeeze on domestic spending, particularly in public sector, but to do so in such a manner that they really don't punish the poorest of the poor in Zimbabwe. It has been suggested that the Congolese war, the DRC Congo war, that in which Zimbabwe got substantially involved, which Zimbabwe must be credited for because that country would have been broken up, partly contributed to this. But Uganda and Rwanda have been in any richer, in different ways, quite informally richer. But so were other members of SADC nation states. So I think, no, it is not as bad. Had it not really been particularly for the drought that hit particularly the agricultural sector, I think these guys may not have been compelled to go through this new currency reform. Remember, inflation had been from the trillion figures to about 50 or thereabout, they say officially 55% of the previous currency early part of this year. That by and large is manageable. Today, they've started trading at a reasonable rate. I'm not quite sure whether that will be maybe maintained, but if confidence is built and if it's ramped up by, if you like, a good message from the government, a reasonable confidence from across the political divide, if only it happened in Zimbabwe, just like happens in most other developed nations, I think this currency could just be given a chance, and I have a reasonable confidence, particularly the money which is backed by gold reserve and others, it should be able to succeed.
Okay, so it all boils down to politics. What's your outlook on Zimbabwe's upcoming general elections, by the way? I'm sure you've got one in your backyard in Uganda, by the way. So, but again, let's talk about Zimbabwe tonight. We'll talk about Uganda another day. So what's the political future of President Emerson Mnangagwa? Is he likely going to recontest? Is he going out of office? What is the optic around the socio-economy of Zimbabwe as they go to the polls very soon?
I think part of his prayers tonight is that this currency works. Because if it does, he will be able to say that he managed to stabilize Zimbabwe post-Robert Mugabe. There was a huge amount of expectations with his coming, but of course it was mixed because he was called Mr. Crocodile. Many people thought he was possibly worse than Robert Mugabe in areas where Mugabe is criticized. I've got my mixed opinion about some of these things, and these guys, because I know them separate from where a narrative presented them. But also, on the other hand, the elections, the opposition last time cried foul. It's just a little bit unfortunate that the Zimbabwean opposition, MDC, has not really done enough as maybe the seasons of Changrai, although in neither time they're substantially backed by foreign interest. That is less interested today, from the base of my own understanding of the whole thing. So basically, partly because the politics in Zimbabwe is generally very much about political party based, meaning ZANU-PF remains still substantially the strong political party on the grounds. It may be just slightly much more difficult for the oppositions to pull it out, but they had cumulatively built. When it comes, unfortunately, to the African continent, politics or personality, even if really the elections were direct presidential, indeed, in this case, possibly mixed parliamentary and presidential, I think the incumbent parties have much more chances and opportunities to do well. In Zimbabwe's case, ZANU-PF still is very, very popular political party, notwithstanding everything that many of us who live outside Zimbabwe would say. I just think that the opposition has not done enough to turn around Minister put him on the base of this and to present him as a man tarnished as Mugabe, as they attempted to do at the beginning. For the moment, really based on the reforms that has taken place, including, as I said, Zimbabwean economy, notwithstanding all that we are talking about, is amongst the fastest growing on the continent. And a number of reforms that this guy did, including the continuation of the process of land reform, which generally a success, notwithstanding the topic that we're having today, maybe the core suffering majority in Zimbabwe may just not think that time is near really for them to radically change a position. But unfortunately, I think as of today, it is still 50-50 going, almost the way things are happening in their neighbors in South Africa.
Very interesting. I think we've got to wait and see how the new currency goes, the ZiG in Zimbabwe. Let's see in the days ahead. Thank you so much, Joseph Ochieno, international journalist and political economist in Kampala. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Have a pleasant evening out there, and we appreciate your time.